The Graceville Oilers inspired a book that became an HBO movie, but the real story is very different. When I tell people I'm researching the Graceville Oilers, one of the first things they mention is Paul Hemphill's book, Long Gone. And that makes sense. For a lot of folks, it's the only connection they've ever heard about this little team from the Florida Panhandle. Paul Hemphill wasn't a novelist pulling a story out of thin air. He was a sports writer from Birmingham, Alabama, and in the early 1950s, he actually came down to Florida chasing a dream of playing ball. He first tried out for the Panama City Flyers, and when that didn't pan out, he came here to Graceville to try out for the Oilers. He didn't make the team, but the experience left an impression. He later wrote about that chapter of his life in his 1974 memoir, The Good Old Boys. He gave a pretty detailed account of his tryouts, the highs, the lows, and what it felt like to be on the edge of professional baseball. And then 5 years later, in 1979, he released his novel, Long Gone, which was inspired by those experiences, but written as fiction. And Hemphill makes that clear right from the start of the book. In fact, let me show you. There really is a town in the Florida Panhandle with the name of Graceville. Once there was a Class D league called the Alabama-Florida League, and a team known as the Graceville Oilers. That is where the facts in this story begin and end. And Hemphill himself tells you up front, this is not nonfiction. And once you get past that disclaimer, you realize pretty quickly this book is not a lighthearted baseball tale. It's rough around the edges, filled with adult themes. Really, more PG-13, maybe even R in book terms. But if we're being honest, that's also the way Class D baseball really was in the 1950s. Hemphill didn't spend enough time in Graceville itself to develop those kind of characters, but he did spend enough time around Class D baseball to know the stories. And that's where the flavor of Long Gone comes from. A mixture of his brief time here and the larger world of the minors. Some of you might also remember the HBO movie from 1987, also called Long Gone. Just like the book, entertaining, funny, even gritty at times, but it's not history. And here's the wild thing. A lot of people believe that if Bull Durham hadn't come out the very next year, Long Gone might have even been remembered as the #1 baseball movie of all time. So when people mention Long Gone in connection with the Oilers, they're not wrong. There's a link. But it's more of a creative spark than a record of what actually happened in Graceville. And that's why the real history matters so much. The Graceville Oilers wasn't just characters in a novel. They were real young men chasing a dream. Real families filling the stands and real community proud to call itself the smallest town in professional baseball. That's the story we're working to preserve. Not the fiction, but the truth. Because the truth is every bit as fascinating as the legend. Because in Graceville, the smallest town in pro baseball, the stories are anything but small.